Last but not least, we will be hearing from the team that's been working with the Global Reporting Initiative under Dubois Akeen.
How's it going, everyone? Congrats to Capstone's finishing this evening. My name is Brooks Brown, and I'm fortunate to be presenting our team's final briefing, where we've worked with the Global Reporting Initiative and their recently launched sector-specific reporting standard for the agriculture, aquaculture, and fishing industries within the United States, titled GRI 13. Now, our team's initial involvement in this project stems from the potential positive impacts that GRI could have on the nation, both environmentally, economically, and socially, but more personally, if you can tell from the outfit, families like mine. So I grew up farming and ranching on both sides of my family, and we are one of the roughly 2.6 million individuals who either raised livestock or grew crops. However, faced with the challenges of climate change, including commodity price instability, prolonged droughts, temperature fluctuation, and various other uncontrollable factors, the family ranch went up for auction last year. Now, while this narrative is regrettably familiar among various U.S. farmers and anglers, a better system for managing and reporting on-ground observations could have potentially mitigated such situations. And this brings me to the importance of GRI and GRI 13. So as a brief reminder, GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, is a nonprofit international institution that sets frameworks and standards for organizations to report upon their impacts from a sustainability perspective. In June of 2022, they launched GRI 13, which focuses on the food production industry at large. Now, GRI 13 is beneficial in its wide-ranging benefits, from impacting billion-dollar organizations all the way down to smaller-scale farming operations like mine, and assessing, measuring, and tracking various components of their operations. Then, let alone on this graphic here, it impacts American day-to-day lives and American ecosystems. So what we're looking at is American household spending, which food products accounts for roughly 13% of all costs, which comes just below housing and transportation, and this is in 2022 numbers. From a landmass perspective, and this was fascinating, roughly 52% of the entire United States landmass is attributed towards agricultural production, equating to roughly 1.2 billion acres. Then even from a recreational standpoint, Americans in 2020 took nearly 200 million saltwater fishing trips, resulting in the loss of 344 million fish in that singular calendar year. So this then leads us to the problem our group was tasked to solve, which is to expedite the adoption of GRI 13 across the food production industry within the United States, which coincides with the sector launch in January 2024, so organizations may implement it in their upcoming sustainability reporting cycles. Now, how we initially did this was that the first part of our project was identifying the total food production market through various different sorting criteria, and then eventually we came up with the number of 10,328 companies in the US that fall within the scope of GRI 13, segmented broadly for this presentation into private organizations, public organizations, and then cooperatives. So at the top of this slide is just a fraction and snapshot of some of the information you would see in our master database of those 10,000 plus companies. From there, we conducted a gap analysis where we are assessing the current sustainability reporting landscape within the industry as a whole, where we whittled down that 10,000 plus companies to 96, split between 28 public, 58 private, and 10 cooperatives, where we looked at various different factors and indicators, which you can see some here on the bottom of this slide, where we're collecting information, again, to assess the sustainability reporting landscape, along with these 17 other indicators of information that we're collecting. So have these organizations previously reported to GRI? At what level of specificity? other standards such as CDP, and then plainly just asking, are they producing a report or doing any work within this space? So from there, we then tried to identify trends and commonalities across the industry as a whole, segmented by type of organization. And so I'll highlight 3 high-level themes from our findings. So firstly, well-known public companies are more likely to do sustainability reporting work within this space, roughly 53% doing some type of report. Private companies, primarily because they lack incentive to report, are not doing a ton within this space at 34% report production rate and a 9.1% average doing any other type of sustainability reporting adjacent work. Cooperatives were the most promising in this, with 70% doing some type of sustainability report and pretty robust. However, we looked at 10 cooperatives, we looked at 96 companies in an industry of 10,000 plus, so take these numbers with a grain of salt, but our high-level analysis, we believe, transfers over to the market at large. From here, we then came up with 6 recommendations for our client to achieve the problem of increasing reporting using GRI 13. So 1 and 2 go together in the sense of, in our initial conversations with GRI, we found out that their internal database on information that they're collecting from organizations that report to GRI 13 GRI may be lacking in specificity and granularity. So we recommend that they leverage some of our insights and how we are sorting and obtaining information on these organizations to just transfer over to GRI as a whole. And this is also coming from working with our employee contacts there of things they wanted, so it'd be perfect if they have it at GRI. Thirdly, we recommend that GRI target companies who have previously reported using GRI standards to be the first adopters of GRI 13, as they'll be familiar with the lift and load and the process to report. Then we recommend they launch pilot programs within those targeted companies to produce case studies, white pages, to essentially illustrate those real-world benefits that these companies are getting from reporting using GRI 13 to create credibility within the industry and persuade other organizations to come along. 5 and 6 kind of go together along the collaboration banner in the sense of, 1, we recommend they collaborate with consulting and assurance firms to find unique pathways to help organizations who have never done this type of reporting before to take that first initial step using GRI and then using GRI 13. And then lastly, we think there's some unique partnership opportunities with financial institutions to raising some capital that might be available to private companies if they were able to meet certain sustainability reporting criteria, such as using GRI 13. In terms of takeaways and our transferability of this project, we think our aforementioned recommendations are really going to set the client up well for success. We also believe that our research process can be transferred over to other sector-specific standards, such as the oil and gas sector and coal sector standards. And then we also believe that GRI has a unique opportunity to execute on influencing public policy. So if you remember in my midterm presentation, I mentioned that we wanted to do something outside the initial scope of our project to make sure that GRI is maintaining that gold level of sustainability reporting. So we were presented with a unique opportunity with the US Farm Bill expiring in September of 2023, and it is currently up for congressional reauthorization as we speak. The US Farm Bill is a true Swiss Army knife piece of legislation as it encapsulates various pieces of legislation and programs such as nutrition, crop insurance, conservation, and others that impact the food production industry, but also American lives. And with this, since it's a monumental bill, it operates on a 5-year cycle, we produced a thought leadership piece on how GRI 13, starting now and moving forward, can be the standard bearer for information to help inform lobbying, policymaking, stakeholder engagement, and ultimately legislation to help prepare this bill and further work within the food production industry to help it go towards more sustainable production practices within the nation. Now, to tie it back to some familial roots and to leave this capstone on a pretty esoteric note, my grandfather used to say a quote when I was rather young, and I did not understand it, but now I kind of do. And it can be attributed to a gentleman named John Jeevons, and I think it grounds this presentation as well. It goes, "Man, despite his artistic pretensions, his many sophistication, and all his accomplishments, owes the fact of his existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains." Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. In your research, did you find any critiques on GRI as a whole, like its approach and the results of its reports, and how did you see where those critiques were coming from? You know, what political parties or what other industries?
Sure. I would say that we didn't spend a ton of time on it. Obviously, did some initial research in the sense of predominantly coming from. Predominantly probably coming from competitors. I will say not something we paid super ton of attention to, just because it was kind of outside of that and we were focused on the problem, and we think GRI is the best. Andres. But yeah.
Hey, thank you. You mentioned that one of your recommendations was around utilizing your process for oil and gas industry. Can you talk through that recommendation and how you got to that?
Sure. I was in the sense of our process for just expanding the reach and scope of increasing like reporting within oil and gas companies to use the sector-specific standards. So not like focusing on the oil and gas industry as a whole, just our process for going about increasing the reach of sector-specific standards itself, not just like the oil and gas. Those are just two other recently launched sector-specific standards I referenced, for example.
Thank you for the presentation. In the case of the reports of the company, the different companies that have different fishing methods, in your analysis, do you think that it's some recommendation specific that you can give for that kind of companies? Or during the research you make, all of them were using the same fishing method? Because depending on the fishing methods you use, about depends of that, depends the impacts to related with sustainability.
Great. So just so I'm hearing you right, you're asking in terms of the fishing industry specific companies and how they would be better poised to report. Is that correct?
Yeah, and if in the reports,
Sure.
is some difference between the fishing methods they have
Gotcha.
related with the impacts they can report.
And so the reports within the fishing industry and the metrics they're using in comparison to, say, like an agricultural one? Yeah, perfect. So I will say vastly different yet similar industries in the sense of like probably a lot of the 26 material topics under GRI 13 are going to be more applicable to, say, like an agricultural company. With fishing predominantly, you know, it's like it's the fish harvested, the fuel costs and whatnot. So we didn't see a ton of discrepancies and differences, but I would also defer to our report and then our further research team within that for specifics that we could also, something we could dive into too, barring that comment for later on. So thank you. Sweet.